across the country. Labels out here, now they can't tell me nothing. Been given to the people, spread it across the country.
Ooh, here we go back. This is the moment. Tonight is the night. I'm gonna do my notes until I put my hands up. Like I really don't know this. Like I really don't know this. This is the moment. Tonight is the night. I'm gonna do my notes until I put my hands up. Like I really don't know this. Like I really don't know this. Ah. Yeah, but that's how some of you feel, I imagine. Well, anyway, we're going to move on here to a little 5-4 sum and difference formulas. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some pretty little lovely formulas that you will be given on your test and your quiz, don't worry. And you're going to evaluate some functions that are not nice, pretty, like 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, intervals, and 90 degrees, and all that stuff. So notice down here you have some sum and difference formulas. So what we're going to do is we're going to have like the sine of two values that we're going to add together. So say we have like the sine of a 30 and a 45. So say we have the sine of 30 plus 45. Well, if 30 represents your u, then what you would say is you would write this out, and you would say that the sine of 30 plus or times the cosine of 45 plus the cosine of 30, because that's your u, times the sine of 45. And what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate each of these functions and leave our answers in exact values. So when we leave them in exact values, that means you leave them with the radicals. Don't just plug it into your calculator. Cheaters. So let's look at our first example here. What we have to do is we have to find the exact value, notice underlined, italicized, of the cosine of 75 degrees. So if we start off with the cosine of 75 degrees, well, there are a couple different ways you could write 75 degrees. It's on your circle, it's just not one of the nice pretty little values that's like our exact values, so like our 30, 45, 60. However, you can rewrite your cosine of 75 degrees as the cosine of, maybe you go 45 plus 30 or 30 plus 45. It doesn't matter what order it goes in. However, you could not use something like a 60 plus a 15 because we don't know what the 15 degrees are. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite our formula now. So if we use the cosine, this is just the same thing as having a cosine of u plus v. And so we're going to use the formula for the cosine of u plus v. A formula for the cosine of u plus v, which is right here. Notice we have a cosine times a cosine and minus a sine times a sine. You might notice some other nice little patterns here. So we're going to say we have our formula is a cosine of u times a cosine of v minus the sine of u times the sine of v. So when we write out when we evaluate this, then, well, our cosine of u is going to end up being, if we let 30 be u and 45 be v, we're going to write this as the cosine of 30 degrees times the cosine of 45 degrees minus the sine of 30 degrees times, the sine of 45 degrees. So what we do is we just evaluate each of these functions now. So if we're at 30 degrees on your unit circle, your cosine of 30 degrees is just a radical 3 over 2. Your cosine of 45 degrees is a radical 2 over 2. Minus, well, if your cosine is 30 degrees, is radical 3 over 2, that must mean that the sine of your 30 degrees is a 1/2. And then your sine of 45 is a radical 2 over 2. So if we simplify this, This just gives us a radical 3 times radical 2 is radical 6 over 2 times 2 is 4 minus a radical 2 over 4, which you can write as our final answer, over 1 fraction as radical 6 minus radical 2 all over 4. And so that is how you could use a cosine of u plus v to find the exact value of cosine of 75 degrees. Now b is not as nice and pretty because we have it in terms of, oops, not a cosine. We have in terms of pi. So we have a pi over 12. So the sine of pi over 12. Well, what I allow you to do is pi over 12, that's the same thing as saying that you're going to have the, if you multiply this by 180 over pi, you're going to find out that you get just a 15 degrees. So this is the same thing as saying the sine of 15 degrees. Well, 15 degrees is not on your circle. However, you could rewrite it by using subtraction. Now, when you subtract to get a 15 degrees, you could either use 45 minus 30, or you could use 60 minus 45. I'm just going to do, let's do 60 minus 45. So if you want to leave it in terms of pi as you can, you would just say the sine of pi over 3 minus pi over 4. So let's figure out our formula for your sine of u minus v. So your formula for your sine of u minus v is just going to be the sine of u times the cosine of v minus, and then we're going to have the cosine of u times the sine of v. So let's evaluate each of these functions. So we're going to say the sine of 60 times the cosine of 45 equals the cosine of 60 times the sine of 45. So let's plug in all of our values now. So your sine of 60. Sine of 60. Well, sine of 60 is going to be a radical 3 over 2. And then, or sorry, sine of 60 is not radical 3 over 2. Okay. Yeah, it is. And then you have your cosine of 45, which would end up being a radical 2 over 2 minus the cosine of 60. Well, the cosine of 60 is going to be a 1/2, and then your sine of 45 is a radical 2 over radical 2. So you just multiply these together, you get a radical 6 over 4 minus radical 2 over 4, and then you just turn it into one nice pretty little fraction. And how, well, you know, it's actually the same value as, whoops, not a radical 4 there. It's going to be the same value as what we get for part A. What a coinky-dink. And there's your answer. So that is how you can use your functions to find some exact values, and how you can use your addition and subtraction formulas.